You need to work on your mentality. Maybe you heard that phrase before. The question is, do mentalities, or often what people call mentalities, have a significant impact on the working world, or is it all just made up chumbawamba by leaders who want you to work more for probably less money? The role of working mentalities, and this topic didn't came up by coincidence. As you probably know, the world economic leaders just recently met in Davos in Switzerland. Of course, they were debating the big problems and the big worries and trying to find solutions to them. One of them, however, was a surprising one, which was the mentality, politics, and location topic, where they talked about which location actually is the most attractive one for the world's economy based on the mentality the people have towards work. So we are going to talk about that because quite a number of questions arrived in my inbox about that. How important are mentalities when it comes to today's work? And very important, and I have to say that up front here, there is one aspect that never leads to any kind of sustainable solution, and that is the approach of just mass generalizing. Because as soon as I ask about mentalities in a corporate or any kind of organization, may it be public or private or charitable or an NGO, most likely it comes time to stereotypes very quickly. So suddenly all leaders are psychopath. All the young people are lazy. No one wants to work anymore but get more money. And next level is that they mass generalize about anyone coming from certain countries. So all the French people are only on strike all day long, and Spanish people do not work at all, and Brits only drink, and Germans are hard workers, and all that kind of nonsense. So we're not going to talk about stereotypes because stereotypes never lead to any kind of sustainable solution. We have a couple of aspects we have to talk about. Of course, we go first in the highest level of the hierarchy. So we have to talk about leaders. We have to talk about the people who work there. We have to talk about the organization and the people. And then look at the conclusion. What are the facts that we have here? So first, looking at leadership. And my first question is, does your organization actually offer sustainable leadership? And of course, most likely your organization will say, yeah, our leaders are pretty good. However, the reality looks pretty different from what most organizations claim. I give you a very simple example. Very often at the moment, I hear about agile leadership. So organizations tell me, oh yeah, we have agile leadership in place. And my first question, of course, is, so which methods do you use? And then they say, yeah, agile, because we're agile. And I ask again, good, very nice. So which methods do you use? And then they say, well, we're agile, Niels. It's agile leadership. That's the method. And that shows you very clearly that they have no clue about anything with agile leadership. Agile methods are a set of methods where you can say, I pick some of them, I pick the vast majority of them, I only apply them in a certain version that applies more to our working world. However, it is not just saying we're agile, which is often nothing else than a euphemism for saying, I want people to work faster with the same results. So just trying to make up higher productivity out of thin air. So as soon as you only blindly following trends and you don't even follow them properly, you only pick up the buzzword, throw it in your organization, and then tell people, look, we have this one now here. And while people are asking, so what's the difference? What's the advantage? What's the disadvantage? How does it find any kind of application in our organization's world? You suddenly say, look, don't be a troublemaker. Don't be a problem bringer. We have agile leadership now, and just take it from there. And then management does one weekend workshop or a two-day workshop during the week, and now we're all agile. This is not how anything works. So you have to see, for example, how often have you delivered leadership moments that were completely non-transparent? So people say, oh, we had a decision, no one knows why. And then, of course, we ask, why did you decide that? And then people said, well, that was decided by the board level, so it's not up to you to discuss. So we just move on. And most likely people will say, well, I'd like to know why they did that. And your answer probably then will be, look, it's none of your business, really. We have to do it anyway, right? So why are you so bothered about that? Non-transparent leadership is one of the main issues why people give up. One of the many issues why people give up on their organization. And then you can't say, oh, they have the wrong attitude or they don't have the right mindset. And by the way, that's a completely misused word in many contexts. Mindset is important, even from a scientific point of view, but not what the mindset industry and the motivational inspirational speakers made out of that, because that is what they say often is pure nonsense. So when you look into your leaders, just look at one number. What is the percentage of your leaders that received professional training before they became leaders? And according to the Chartered Management Institute, CMI in the UK, 82% of today's leaders never received any kind of formal training. And of course, formal training has at least two sides. One is the practice one, but the other side also means you need to know methods, you need to know the science behind that. And it doesn't have to be an academic degree here. However, you need a leadership training, and no, that is not an internal person pulling out the PowerPoint someone designed a decade ago and reading out these slides. So you call it leadership training. You need professional leadership trainers. These are most likely external people who get paid professionally, who deliver professional training for your organization. So what's the percentage of them in your organization? And when this percentage is low, then please do not complain about people's mentality. The problem is bad leadership. The problem is not the people. However, of course, one part of the game is the people, and let's talk about them. The first thing you have to find out is who has opinion leadership in your department, organization, team, or group. Normally, when a group is larger than 4 to 5 people, somewhere in that area, someone emerges on a very social, complex basis, and being the opinion leader. That means the person is probably no one, and of course, high comma, no one, in on the hierarchical pyramid, but it's the person absolutely anyone listens to in your organization. Even if they don't have an important title, it is just the person people listen to for different reasons. And when you probably had to go against them, you already lost the whole department. And the question is, are your leaders able to connect to opinion leadership, and through the opinion leadership to connect to other people in the organization, getting your message across? But of course, just knowing opinion leadership and probably working with them a bit closer is not everything. You have to offer straightforward benefits. And by the way, a great pay is the starting point of that. So if I, for example, say, do you offer them an attractive contract? That means normally a contract which is not limited by time. That's where probably, depending on the country you're now listening from, already about 1/5 says, not from the beginning. And that's where the problem begins. You have to look into what benefits package do you offer. By the way, you have to avoid any kind of excuses, which I often hear. One thing I often hear at the moment that people say, oh, the economic situation doesn't allow to pay you more. Yeah, that's called the so-called you problem. When your organization can't pay more, you are not entitled to expecting people to work hard for very little money. Obviously, you have to work on your business model. You have to renegotiate contracts. You have to optimize the cost structure. There are many aspects which you can work on, but simply expecting people to work very hard for very little money, which probably isn't even enough to make ends meet in the area where you expect them to work, that is the definition of entitlement thinking, something you normally hold against employees. So be aware that mentality is also based on the fact that people say, is it actually worth doing what I do here? Does it pay off? And of course, you then have to see, are your leaders qualified? Are they able to deliver a situative approach to leadership? Do they lead person by person, not with a one-size-fits-all solution, or even worse, telling people, I am that kind of leader, you have to adapt to me, which is completely out of fashion and very old-fashioned style of leadership. Are they able to motivate people? Are they even able to define how motivation in people works? And are they able to lead without ego, without being the center of the spotlight, without being the rock star of the department? Because if not, you know where you have to start from, and that's your leadership level. However, of course, sometimes you have people where you say, maybe it is their fault, and we get to that in a minute. Before we talk about the person, like one person, just picking one person and talking about them, we have to talk about the organization. What is your organizational culture? Was there an active design process of designing a leadership and organizational culture, or was it the typical management did a workshop and then you printed posters, put them in the elevators and say, that's our new culture? And then the employee says, oh, great. So here are our values. Great that no one asked me about this because I don't think we're living any of that. So when we talk about having an organizational culture, it's an active design process which you should do together. And the question is, did you create this organizational culture, and did this culture sustain? Or was it just decided by management telling people that's the culture we have right now, and the menu of today is take it or leave it? Because then you shouldn't be surprised that quite a number of people decide to leave it rather than to take it. But when we talk about exactly these people, of course, you cannot always say it's always the organization, it's always the leaders. Very often it is. And also, it is way easier to change your organization and the people in there by qualifying them rather than telling people that they have to change. Changing circumstances is possible. Changing personalities, not so much. Depending on the means you want to take, it is either a lot of effort or illegal, depending on what you choose. So when people are now listening and say, well, look, I'm not really enjoying to go to work, I think it's a bit pointless. You always have to ask yourself a couple of questions. So first, what does work mean for you? And when you say work to me only means I have to pay the rent and I want to have a bit of money less, that's perfectly fine. You can do that, of course. You can say I just show up to get my rent paid. Perfect. However, of course, when you show that attitude and that mentality to work, as soon as they pick someone for promotion, you are very, very last on that list, and rightfully so. Because if you let's just put yourself in the shoes of your team lead, and you are that team lead, and someone asks you, who would you promote? Would you write down on that list? I think the most important thing is to have someone who only shows up because they want to pay the rent. Probably you will say, no, we need someone who walks the extra mile, someone who is proactive, someone who sees when work is to be done and they engage with work instead of looking away, allowing other people to do it, or actually forcing other people to do it because they look away when they are seeing anything that is related to work. So what does work mean for you? And the second question, which role in life does work have for you? I can tell from my experience, and of course, you do not have to stick to my experience, especially when I started out, that was the end of the 90s. I worked way longer than my contract said, especially when I worked, no matter if it was GlaxoSmithKline, where I had a very good boss who saw that I worked more, put the effort in, but also that when I worked, and fortunately I had a very good onboarding, so I was able and empowered to do something reasonable. When I delivered more results, I had a good return on that from a career and also from an income point of view. When I then became self-employed working for Microsoft, for New Horizons, Microsoft's largest learning partner, then I saw that working self-employed sometimes means you even have to put work in when it's not really paid. So I, for example, with New Horizons, volunteered to say, could you probably give me the permit that I see the whole initial franchise training in Los Angeles? So that means I fly to Los Angeles on my own bill, fly back on my own bill, hotels on my own bill, and it was located in Anaheim, not the most sexy location. It sounds great, but believe me, even the Disney World there isn't too amazing. So you always think LA is next door. It's more than an hour car drive, so it's not really next door. Very important is what role does work have in your life? It's perfectly fine when you say, I don't need to have a career, I just want to have a safe job. Perfect. However, and that is a question which, in my opinion, at the moment, we are not having enough, at least not enough in the public debate. There is a connection between the investment you make and the return you get. When you invest more hours in the first place and you do not work in a completely in a completely exploiting organization with very bad leaders, any reasonable organization, when you show up to do more than they expect, you will have return. It's called reciprocity. Anyone's looking for talent. If you show that you can do more, you're willing to do more, they will give you the chance to do more. And that always, at the end, has a result that also influences your paycheck, your income, your career choices. And also you have to see, when you say you don't want to invest more hours, and then always say, you of course can. You can say, I only want to work 30 hours. Normally, when you work less hours, have less experience, you are less valuable for the organization. With less experience, you get less qualification at the end. You probably have less access to other people's experiences, which you normally would work from, would work with. And when you especially say you also want to have less qualification because it's all too much hassle and you don't like exams and you don't want to have anything to write down for a thesis or anything similar, when you say all that, it's still fine. However, having more spare time normally means you want to do more things in your spare time. What do you need to do that? Probably more money. How do you get more money? Well, probably not with a work mentality where you say, I just show up to actually fulfill the minimum hours that are mentioned in my contract. Probably it's worth thinking about that as well. There is a connection between the invest and the return. So there's no one to blame here, neither the organization nor the people in the organization. It is a very complex and interwoven system where people are connected to each other. So looking into the facts, of course, you also have to look into working laws. How many hours are you allowed to work? And there are unions, of course, in many organizations. What is the usual working time that is agreed upon? Which flexibility do you have there? All that plays a role, no question about that. More also doesn't automatically mean it's better. Just because someone works 60 hours instead of 40 doesn't mean they are more productive by 50%. That is blindingly obvious. Also, when you work longer, there's a certain tipping point where you do more errors, make more mistakes, and you need more time to correct these errors. And some of these errors might have consequences on, for example, yourself, machinery, the organization, or all three of the mentioned before of the ones I mentioned before. So be careful about that. A mentality is always anchored in your organization. It was created probably a long time ago when the company is not completely new. You always have to actively work on that. And when diversity is in place, and there's a strong scientific evidence to that, diversity always adds value to the organization you work for. Because when you get different cultures together, different people, different backgrounds, you do not have this one culture has to adapt to everyone, which makes your organization very unattractive to the vast majority of workforce available on the market. Especially in today's shortage of workforce and labor, you probably want to be one of these organizations where you say we are open for everything. You probably set some boundaries, but it's your job to proactively create an amazing organizational culture. And of course, then in an excellent recruiting process to find the right people with the right mentality for your organization. Because when that comes together, a very good employer with excellent and well-trained leaders, in a proactively created and always worked on organizational culture with an amazing recruiting process, hopefully with an excellent infrastructure, IT, of course, also is part of it. When all this comes together, then you truly have a sustainably run organization where the mentality is thriving and anyone is part of that and anyone likes to say, actually, I like to go to work in the morning. It's not something I make bearable to pay the rent. It is something which is an integral part of my life and I actually like to do that. And also, there's strong scientific evidence for that because some of you might still think that people are unemployed, that they're just lazy. Many people want to work. Some people, for different reasons, don't have jobs at the moment. There are very few, roughly 2 to 3% are really the ones who probably do not work or are just transitioning at the moment from one job to another. However, there's a strong psychological burden on people who are unemployed because you wake up, you have nothing to do, there's no social network. So please get away from the assumption that all people who have no work are just lazy, because that's just not true. With all the aspects mentioned before, I think you now have some task on your list where you think, I think we could work on that. It's your job to do it all together. It is never the leaders versus the employees or the board versus the unions. Look at the leaders, look at the employees, look at the people who work for you, including your suppliers, look at the organization, and then look at each and every person by themselves. And you will find amazing things that you can make happen when you all just work together, because then you have the mentality you actually want to have in your organization. And for that, I wish you all the best. And of course, now some people might say, well, that is quite a complex thing. Yes, it is. Absolutely. And if you have some questions, if you look into the show notes of this podcast, I give you the options to contact me. There's my email address, nb@nb-networks.com. And of course, there's my LinkedIn as well, where you can connect to me. And feel free to throw anything at me that you like to have answered. Of course, when you say you need something very specific, training, speaking, coaching, happy to do that as well. Just drop me a line and then we take it from there. It doesn't cost any one of us a penny. The second aspect, what I recommend is join the list for the leadership letter, because we have live sessions available in the English and German language. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, just put your email address in there, and then we take it from there. That you receive one email, only one email every Wednesday morning. It's 100% content, ad-free guarantee. Access to the live sessions and anything I published is only available via that letter. And of course, all these sessions are free of charge. That goes without saying for anyone who listens here and reads our expert letter. And the last aspect is the one which I always recommend the most. Apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive aspect and the positive results that you actually want to see in your organization. I wish you all the best doing so. And if you need any kind of help, just let me know. Available 24/7 for you to help. Thank you very much again for listening. And at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.